How's it going? Let me just flip. I'm super honored to be here to nerd out with all of you on some product stuff. I've had various product roles in my life in some form or another. So I've been a founder, I've been a PM for many years, and for a while now, actually, I've been a leader of cross-functional teams of PMs, designers, and engineers. So today, I work on a team and lead one that is focused on platform at Shopify. So we're about 200 people, and platform has been one of the most interesting domains in my product experience, and it's what I want to talk with all of you about today. So at Shopify, we've grown from this tiny Canadian tech startup to now a $40 billion public company. And what we've seen throughout the years is that more and more of our teams are changing their work from being product-focused towards platform. And my team is actually at the epicenter of a lot of that change. So I hope to share with you today what platform could mean for your product strategies and your companies, and also share some tidbits about how we learned to build a platform at Shopify. So it's always worthwhile to start out by just talking about what do we mean when we say platform, because it's probably one of the most ambiguous terms in tech. And so I'm going to share with you how I think about it, hopefully in a simple way. So I think about it in contrast to products, right? So products are what we build, and then we ship it to an end customer, whereas a platform is we're building a platform for other builders or creators to then ship it to end customers, right? So it's only one step in a direction, but it has huge ramifications for our work as product managers. And the biggest reason is because we can no longer control what it is that the end customer is seeing, right? We can only control who we let build on the platforms that we manage. So there are three major types of platforms in this universe. I kind of made up this structure. But the first one is developer platforms. I think those are the ones that are most intuitive to all of us. So these are the operating systems of old and companies today like Stripe and Twilio. And really, they enable developers to build products faster. So developers pay them for some sort of compute. And I think one of the unique qualities of developer platforms is they tend to have no relationship with the end customer. So when you have an app and you get an SMS message, you have no idea that it's from Twilio, right? The next category are some of the big marketplace and consumer platforms. So in abstraction, I think about these as they are enabling creators and consumers of X, whether that is videos or rides or whatever it may be. So these types of platforms are really trust platforms that enable two types of people or many people to actually trust each other to transact. But there's a third category, which I didn't really have a name for, so I made one up. But it's a combination of the two. So I call these product extension platforms. And this is actually what Shopify is, as well as a lot of really big companies. We just maybe don't have a name for it. So what are product extension platforms? They are basically platforms with the purpose of enabling third-party app developers to make the product better so that your product is more appealing to your customers, right? So the simplest example is an iPhone, where you buy an iPhone, yes, for the amazing hardware and operating system, but a lot for the apps, right? So this is actually something that I think is one of the most interesting platform types, and also mostly universally applicable to everyone here. And the reason is because if you're not already a developer tools company, or you're not already a consumer marketplace, you're not likely just going to become one. But if you are a product and you're selling it to a customer, which most of us are, you have the opportunity to actually open up your product so that developers can inject experiences and build apps into it. So why would you do that, though? So here's the sort of strategy and theory behind product extension platforms, right? So on the x-axis, we have time, growth of your company, and hopefully over time, you're getting lots and lots of customers. But as you do, the number of problems you need to solve for all of them is going to rise exponentially, right? You might be expanding globally, rate of technology change. I think anyone that's worked at a company that has grown significantly knows that that backlog never shrinks. It actually grows into infinity, right? Couple this with a different problem, which is even with unlimited resources, you're never going to be able to solve all those problems. And that's just a law of large companies. Like, they just can't do it. You can't coordinate at that level. So how do you fill this gap between the problems your customers have and what you have the capacity to do? And it's a widening gap. Well, that's what product extension platforms are all about. Let developers fill that gap. And the reason why they can is because they're distributed all over the world. They'll know the niche use cases of your customers. They'll know different cultures and languages and different tech stacks. They'll be able to actually fill those gaps faster, right? So how do these types of platforms grow? Through a very simple flywheel. You have your own customer base that you've grown through growing your own company, and that's the bottom left here. And that base of customers that you've accumulated is very attractive to developers, right? They want to build apps for them. They want to sell to them. So if you figure out a way for them to build apps into your product, that's going to make your product better, and you're going to get more customers. And the flywheel will reinforce itself. So to give you a tangible example, here's Shopify's platform. So for those of you that don't know much about Shopify, we are a commerce platform, and we power over 800,000 businesses globally today. We have done over 100 billion in sales since we started, and we're actually the #3 online US retailer after Amazon and Walmart in aggregate. So in a given year, over 200 million US residents will actually buy from a Shopify store, even though they don't know it. So we figured out the merchant part, and I think how we actually enable developers to make our product better is what I want to show you next. So here's our developer portal, and you can see we show them the business value and whatnot. But really, our developer platform is a set of APIs and UI extensions into Shopify, which let a developer mutate any data in a shop. So they can update prices for products, they can fulfill orders for the merchant, and they can also actually build an app and embed it inside of Shopify. So I'll give you a sense of what that's like with my own store. So I sell mirrors, and I'll just leave it at that. But inside of Shopify, I'm clicking Messenger on the left sidebar, and everything you're seeing right now is an app. So we didn't build it. And what this app does is it actually lets you put in a Facebook Messenger chat widget onto your store. It's going to pop up on the right there. Now, this is not like an insane feature or anything like that, but it's really powerful when you think of it in aggregate. Right? This is one feature that we didn't have to coordinate with, and actually it just emerged on the platform. And it's a feature our customers can use. So if you multiply that by thousands and thousands of developers and apps and features, you start to realize, holy shit, your product's going to become really powerful. And then finally, once we have all these apps, how do we connect them to the customers, our merchants, who are looking for them? Well, we built a marketplace. So we have an app store. We've laid out a taxonomy of different commerce categories, and we have thousands and thousands of apps today in that app store. So what has been the impact of our product extension platform? We have tens of thousands of developers around the world today on it. Developers were paid out over $100 million in the last 12 months, and that's growing at over 100% year over year. And I think most importantly, the customers of Shopify, the merchants, are finding immense value in those apps. So 85% of them say that apps are a critical part of using Shopify at all. And merchants today are using over 7 apps each on average. And that's amazing because all those 7 apps, they're completely different for every single merchant because every business is unique. So enough about Shopify, well, almost enough. I think in the last 4 years, we've learned a lot. We've grown so much in those 4 years. And the rest of this presentation is all about sharing with all of you, if you're ever going to think about doing something like this, what you should think about and maybe double down on from the start. So in those 4 years, we grew app installs by 28 times. We grew payouts to developers by 14 times, and our team grew 10 times. So here's what we tell ourselves if we started again from scratch. So the first piece is all about accelerating the flywheel and recognizing that that's your job as a platform manager. Right? So the diagram I showed you earlier, it's one thing to look at it theoretically And conceptually, and like it's pretty simple, so we all kind of get that. But how do you actually operationalize something like this? So here's some ways that we did. We actually structured our teams around the flywheel. So I'll give you an example of 3 teams that exist today. The first is called App Capabilities. So this team, their mandate is really, you need to create new ways for developers to build apps into Shopify, whether that's APIs or new ways to create UI inside of Shopify. The next team is the App Store and Algorithms team, and their job is to connect the apps to the right merchant at the right time. So they'll build on the marketplace, but they'll also work on recommendation systems that we give to our merchants so that they can find the right app. And then to close the feedback loop, we have a team called Developer Growth. So they're doing things like working on payouts to developers, making sure they have good reporting so they understand how their apps are being used and the traction they have. But I think importantly, they're also giving those developers insights about what else our customers need. So if we know we're growing quickly in India, we can tell our developer ecosystem that, right? That's really important information for them to know how to reinvest in our platform. The second thing we learned about accelerating the flywheel was that there's this sort of class of products, which we ended up calling trust products. And in isolation, any feature within a trust product wouldn't really be that valuable. But I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to ask for a little participation. So as a consumer, which platform do you feel safer using third-party apps from? Okay, so don't overthink this. Can I get show of hands for Apple? Okay, and show of hands for Google. Okay, so I don't think it's surprising to everyone here, right? Apple probably 10 to 1, I think, in this audience. And it's not really important what the answer was, but more for us to reflect that the interactions we have with a brand and a platform, they add up over time. And they fill up this barometer of trust we have with that brand or the platform. And that has real impact to how willing we are to interact with that platform, right? So every interaction in this flywheel is greased by how much brand affinity and trust we have with the platform. So this is hard because we know it conceptually, but we're often dealing with, like, how do we resource these things? Because these features don't necessarily have any specific direct ROI. So here are things that we ended up putting a lot of resources into, but we couldn't really build a business case around it, I don't think. So things like the app install permissions page, the ability to automatically delete data when you delete an app, getting really good third-party support from apps, and then also redesigning the reviews page. So really the takeaway is that you need some conviction that the trust with the platform and the brand is something you need to invest in long term, even though a particular feature might not meet the mark on your ROI. The last piece is who we need on the team. So I'm going to go through some specific skills that we found were really useful for PMs that work on platform. And to be clear, this was also, I think, useful for designers and engineers and anyone really on the team. So the 3 things are software engineering, economics, and operations. So software engineering is, pretty intuitive. The product is code. And it's pretty hard, I think, if you've never written any code, to build really great developer products. And I'm saying this as someone who isn't an engineer as well. Next, economics. And to be clear, it's specifically microeconomics. So this is the world of pricing, of supply and demand in marketplaces. What we found is that we could always look at our platform like a chart like this, where there's the demand for apps and features on Shopify, which are basically limitless from our customers. And then there's the supply of apps that we have, right? So a PM or anyone that has an intuition about economics could be able to maybe break this down and figure out what is that gap, right? So we learned things like sometimes the apps were too expensive in a certain category. Sometimes the search algorithm sucked, and the apps were actually there, but we couldn't enable people to find them. And then other times, the apps just weren't there. But we're not going to stop at that because that's actually an opportunity for developers, right? When we know people are looking for something, but it's not there. The last piece is operations. And I think for PMs of any product, operations is really important. But it's doubly so for platform. Because in platform, you're arbitrating 2 constituents. between developers and your users. And it's hard because you have to exert your policy. You have to make sure that things are safe and in high quality. So when you build your product, you can't just throw it over the fence. You actually have to design the automation tools, the ways to check for data security and all these types of things as you add more features into the product. So that's the first thing. It's accelerating the flywheel. And really focusing your efforts on that is going to lead to a lot of growth. The next thing is earning trust with developers. And that's natural if you're going to start a platform. I'm going to ask the same question now, but slightly different. Now you're a developer. So which platform would you rather do business with? Let's go show of hands for Apple. OK, and show of hands for Google. OK, so that's really interesting, right? Because it's actually the same reason. Right? We love it as consumers and we trust the platform. But if we flip on the other side, all of a sudden we want to work with the other company. And I think that's the tension that you have to manage as a platform manager. So how do you do that? How do you earn trust with developers? Well, there's a really important foundation, which is that the purpose of your platform, the policy that you have on the business model has to be in harmony. So I'll unwind that a bit for us. The purpose is the foundation, so why you even bothered to invest all this time into it. And your policy is what you punish, and your business model is what you reward, right? And they have to sit on top of it. So I'll give you an example with Shopify. Our purpose is to really help merchants succeed. That's what our product is all about. So therefore, our business model is going to reward developers who help merchants succeed. And you better believe that if you have an app that's really helping merchants do really well, it's going to rank higher in the App Store. We're going to co-market it. It's going to get recommended. In contrast, our policy has to be the thing to say that it's the things that we don't allow because they're not in the best interest of merchants. Right? So I'll give you an example of this harmony at play. Our App Store algorithm, which I'm not going to go through all the ranking factors, but these are all factors that are to the benefit of merchants. And what's amazing is that we're able to actually publish this and be transparent with developers that these are the ranking factors. Right? That's what the harmony allows you to do. It's to be transparent with both sides of your platform. Another example, so GDPR, we made changes last year, as everyone did. And what we ended up doing was actually asking more of the developer ecosystem than I think was technically required. Right? So we actually asked the developer ecosystem to be GDPR compliant with all users around the world, not just European users. And the reason we did that is so that it's much simpler for a business on Shopify to know that if they're using an app, that it'll work regardless of where their customer is. Right? It's much simpler for them. So this was hard for developers because it was a huge increase in scope of the work. But they understood it because it aligned with our purpose. Next is all about investing in community. So especially when you're starting out, you have to think of getting your first developers like getting your first customers of your product. Right? You have to sell. So this is Bold, and they are one of the first developers on our platform. Today, they're 300 people. They raised $22 million last year. And Harley, our COO, he went out to Winnipeg, and he just pitched them Shopify when no one was on it, had beers with them, et cetera. Right? You have to figure out a way to get people to take a bet on you, because really, developers have the most optionality in the world. Right? So why would they build on you? After a while, though, as you get traction, you can start to scale it to one-to-many types of things. So we have tons of meetups around the world. We either run them ourselves, or incredibly, we actually have developers that self-host them now because they want to build community with each other. And as you get really large, you can start to have a corporate conference. So here's ours, Shopify Unite, where we have execs. We do some execs do some talks. We have some product launches, and we really just celebrate the developer community. The last piece on earning trust with developers is to treat them as business partners, not just like some user on your platform. They are investing a ton into a bet really on your platform. So if you're ever in a case where you're going to disrupt them, or the API breaks, or something bad is happening to their business, pick up the phone and call them. Right? You have to give them that respect and manage that relationship the right way. Similarly, your team is going to be exerting its policy all the time. right? It's going to say this app can't be on the platform, this app can be, and it's ultimately going to be humans that are making these decisions. So how do you ensure that it's actually fair across the platform? That's important for developer trust. So one thing that we do is anytime we exert a policy, whatever it may be, we actually look backwards in time. It's kind of like case law in the legal system. And we look backwards in time and we say, when's the last time we applied that policy? And are the circumstances here similar? And the last piece is you have to do everything you can to make these developers successful. Right? Everyone loses if they spend 6 months building an app that no one wants. So earning trust with developers is the second thing. The last one is all about being patient. So this is my son, Nolan. He's 10 weeks old as of like 2 days ago. And, oh, thank you. I'll be honest, I just wanted to like put him in the presentation for whatever reason. But children and patience is good. So I think with platforms, you got to be patient. And I showed you this graph of growth earlier, but it was a little disingenuous because that's just when I started working on it. The platforms existed since 2009. And it took a long time, like 5 years of there being a handful of developers on it. So you need some conviction as a company to say that you're willing to be patient. And in platform, patience is king because creativity is just unpredictable. So here's some examples of things that have just emerged in our platform. We have an app that adds a snowfall to your store. And for whatever reason, thousands of merchants use this app, okay? So you never know. We have another app that celebrates business success. So when a merchant sells something for over $500, it automatically orders them a pizza. We have other really cool apps that, in this case, you can add a feature in your checkout so that a customer can pay an extra buck and get a tree planted anywhere in the world. But every once in a while, there's going to be an app that emerges, and it actually changes the trajectory of your company. And we had one a few years ago called Uberlow. So Uberlow, what it does is it allows a business owner to connect to a network of factories and manufacturers around the world, and then list the products that they can build on their store. So they don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on inventory. They just wait for an order to come through, and then the manufacturer will send that product directly to the end customer. It's called dropshipping. So we saw this growing really quickly in 2015. We actually ended up acquiring this company in 2016. And today, hundreds of thousands of businesses on Shopify are using apps like this and the dropshipping model. Platform changes, they take time. So in my experience, compared to a similar change that is just a feature or just the product, it takes about 2 to 5 times longer. And the reason is because you have to do things carefully and sequentially. You have to tell developers you're going to make a change to the data model. You got to ship the new API. You have to wait for them to refactor their apps. Then you have to ship the feature. Then you have to deal with all the apps that are actually didn't refactor and now they're broken, right? This is really gritty and painful work, and a lot of companies are not willing to actually go through it. So like my team has spent a lot of time internally actually helping people do this the right way, but it is hard. The last notion about being patient is all about staying open as long as possible. So what do I mean by open? As a platform manager, you have a really big strategic decision about how open you're going to be, which is how free you're going to be with the APIs, the data, how much UI they can put in the product, and the risk that comes with that, versus how closed you're going to be, which is saying, you can build an app, but I can only do this one thing in this area of the product. And that is one of the biggest levers you have of spinning that flywheel and moving up your growth. So there are companies, and I'm going to use this example last time, that are on different parts of that spectrum. Google is more open than Apple, right? You can't install, really, an app on Apple unless it's through the App Store, whereas on Google, you can install an Android app directly. And companies are also not static in terms of where they are on this spectrum. So Facebook of 2010 is much more open than the Facebook of today for various reasons. So that actual trajectory is something that is sort of like a law in platform, which is that as platforms grow, they'll move to becoming more closed. And there's 2 big reasons for that. One is that as the company grows, their brand risk grows. So even one bad thing happening on the platform that creates really bad PR is actually a huge negative impact on trust. And we already talked about how important that is. The other reason is because basically they can, right? Like as these platforms grow really large, they are aggregating so many of a certain type of customer that they're really the only game in town. And that's an unfortunate thing, but it's also, if you put yourself in the shoes of the platform company, they can tolerate risk or they could close and be safer with no loss, right? So these two forces are really moving companies to be more closed over time, and it's a trend you can see across all the big platforms. So as a platform manager, what do you have to do? You actually have to fight that urge to close and be super safe. Because the longer you stay open, the more creative things will happen. So you have to have your own kind of gut feel about how much risk you're willing to tolerate at any given time. You will close, even Shopify has over time a little bit, but you should fight that urge and be as open as long as possible. So I know that was a lot. There's actually way more. But I hope it's been interesting for you all. I think that product extension platforms are a really important part of product strategy that we don't talk about enough, especially in a world where we can build and connect products in ways that we never could before. So I hope that you can think about this opportunity and maybe open a discussion with your own companies about investing in it. But thank you very much.